Everybody who eats American food is in bad shape. I thought, how could this be right, Dad, and everybody else in the world be wrong? But as I got more into it and read more about it and saw it with my own eyes, I became more open to learning, more reading, more seeing. I realized that there was something valuable here. I've written more than maybe 12 books and 8 booklets, 7 New York Times bestselling books. I'd like them to go to a more modern book, and that's why I wrote Eat for Life, and the changes, the little tweaks and different way of thinking I have today compared to...
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I have the honor of speaking with a true pioneer in the plant-based movement, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, a board-certified family physician, nutritional researcher, and a New York Times best-selling author. Dr. Fuhrman has dedicated his life to showing us how proper nutrition can prevent and reverse disease. He's known for his revolutionary nutritarian diet. He's helped thousands transform their health through the power of whole, nutrient-dense plant foods. Dr. Fuhrman is also the leading educator and advocate with decades of experience empowering people to take control of their health. And so we're going to do a deep dive into his expertise and explore how we can all live healthier, longer, and more vibrant lives. And at the end of the podcast, I'm also going to be doing a giveaway 5 copies of Dr. Fuhrman's latest book, Eat for Life. So be sure to stay tuned until the end so you can learn how to win that for free. Plus, we'll have a free gift for everyone listening. So stay tuned until the end.
All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day.
Dr. Fuhrman, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and we recently got connected at the Plant Nutrition Project in Anaheim, I think a few weeks ago, and I'm happy we're able to make this recording happen.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you and get to have that connection.
Yeah. So just some people might be newer to you that are listening to this podcast. And it's called a Fit Vegan Podcast, and typically it'll attract people that are already whole food plant-based that are looking to optimize themselves. And on the flip side, we're going to have people in the more fitness, health space that are looking to transition and learn more about whole food plant-based. So they might not be familiar with all the top plant-based doctors that are in the space. So do you mind kind of sharing a little bit of your story as to what got you to do the type of work that you do today?
Well, I was on the United States World Figure Skating team in my early 20s and late teens. So I was second in the United States in pairs figure skating with my sister. So I was a serious competitive athlete that trained all day long. That was my full-time job. And then, I went to college. I didn't take any pre-med courses or take any expectations going to medical school. I thought I was going to be training for the Olympics and competing, and continuing to train in ice skating. I got injured and couldn't compete in the 76 Olympics, even though in 74 I was ranked number 1 in the country. My family had a shoe business, so at that point I turned professional and I started to work with the expectation of taking over my family's chain of shoe stores in the New York metropolitan area. Because through my teenage years, I had taken on the hobby of reading all the natural hygiene literature, particularly of Herbert Shelton. My father introduced me to that because he was overweight and was sickly. So I became familiar with that body of work. And I utilized excellent nutrition to improve our stamina and performance as an athlete for most of my young life. As I transitioned into the working world, after leaving the skating world, then I realized that my passion in business was not really as strong as my passion for nutritional excellence, and possibly I had this idea of going back to school and retaking all the courses again, the college courses I hadn't taken that could enable me to apply to medical school to be a doctor specializing in nutritional medicine. So I debated with that and started to pursue that. And then I started dating my wife, Lisa, I met her before, we just began dating. And she was applying to medical schools and kind of assisted me or encouraged me to give up the shoe business, sell the business so my father could retire and jump back to school, because I didn't think it was, I was like, I didn't know about these programs, these postgraduate pre-med programs. So at that point, when I started talking to her about what are you going to medical school for, doctors just give people toxic drugs to then try to lessen the side effects of their bad habits, and they're not doing anything to help people. Doctors do kind of what they do is worthless, except for emergencies. They're just making people worse. So I said, so she said, well, if you're so passionate about that, why don't you go to medical school and change things? So I said, well, I thought about it, but I really thought it was too late for me. I think I'm too old. I didn't take the pre-medical coursework to get in, So then she said, just do it. Just take all the courses at once. Go to Columbia. They have a postgraduate pre-med program. In 1 year, you can take every course and then apply to medical school. It's just 1 year of your life, So and then I, of course, had to take the MCATs. So I decided to do that. I gave up my father's shoe business. He sold it and retired. And I went full-time back to school, not to go to medical school first, but just to go back to school after I had already graduated college to take the postgraduate medical requirements at Columbia and then apply to medical school. And I did well and went to the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And I found that I enjoyed medical school and found that it was a good basis for me to establish a career in nutritional medicine. And I became a board certified family physician, so I could take care of all ages all ages and all conditions. I did a lot of sports medicine, delivered babies, sutured a lot of injuries, and removed skin tumors. So I did stress tests, flexible sigmoidoscopies. I did a lot of conventional family medicine, but all centered around using nutrition as my primary and favorite intervention for people to get well.
At what age did you decide to go back to medical school? At what age was that pivot?
I entered medical school, I was 29. So I had to pivot at about 27 to take the coursework between 27 and 28, and then between ages 28 and 29 to apply and get in and start medical school. So I think when 27 to 29, I was taking the courses and applying to medical school.
Yeah. When did plant-based nutrition come in the whole picture? Because, assuming that back then it wasn't as popular as it is today, there wasn't as many studies or as much information out there. Obviously, you were passionate about medicine and about nutrition. Were you already in the plant-based mindset at that point, or did that come later on in your career?
No, I was already in that mindset back then.
So what was it that made you go plant-based originally?
My growth and growing up, being exposed to the natural hygiene movement and literature. So I already had a huge exposure to seeing people make recoveries from serious illnesses through the work of Shelton and the other hygienic pioneers. So this is a movement that started in the 1800s, and Dr. Shelton did most of his writings between 1940 and 1955 or 1960. So I don't think everything Shelton wrote was correct, but he certainly got us going in the right direction, and we made much tweaks to his to the movement that he really started. And he was a very prolific writer, and he had there was a growing number of people who were embracing this quote natural hygiene movement back then. And my father was one of those people, and I became enthusiastic about it and went to a lot of those conferences and conventions back in the 1970s when I was young.
So basically being exposed to the information made sense to you, and that's kind of what made you eat more of that way. Well, I would try to connect two dots here. So you mentioned your father was a little bit overweight and sickly, but he was a part of the movement as well, right? So was he eating plant-based as well at the time, or when did that kind of come in for him?
Yes, my father started eating much healthier, changed his diet, lost weight, felt a lot better with all those musculoskeletal back pains and kidney problems. And I thought he was crazy. I thought, how could this be right, Dad, and everybody else in the world be wrong? This doesn't make any sense that everybody has it wrong except for just this small group and this one guy, these couple of people. But as I got more into it and read more about it and saw it with my own eyes, I became more, first skeptical. I became more open to learning, more reading, more seeing. I realized that there was something valuable here, and started embracing eating healthier myself and seeing the benefits with cardiorespiratory stamina improvements.
Yeah.
It's just like Novak Djokovic, who was a great tennis player when he was young, but he wasn't top three in the world. He was a great player, but he wasn't good at the end of those 4 to 5 tough matches until he really changed his diet to get the kind of stamina that he could really survive for a couple of hours under such high pressure. So I felt the same way, that it definitely gave us a more clean and response to heavy training, where we really were getting more progress in our training too. So I was a
Yeah.
very serious competitive athlete, in heavy exercise all day long, and with eating huge amounts of healthy food. I had to fill up the back seat of my car with like a bathtub amount of food every day because I was exercising all day long.
Yeah. I didn't know that about your background in sports, because obviously I heard your story, a little bit of your story in your talk when we were at Plant Nutrition Project, but I
Yeah.
did not know that background as a high level athlete.
Yeah. And then I was on crutches for a long time. I got injured in 1970. I became second in the national pairs championships in 1973. The top team that we it was a close event. They won by 5 judges. We won by 4 judges. And then they quit and retired. And then so we were ranked number 1 in the country in 1974, but I couldn't get to the national championships because I got hurt so bad. I couldn't walk for a long time. So it kind of derailed my skating career, that injury. I tried to get back in time for the 76 Olympics, and I did come in third in the world in professional pair skating in 1976. I was getting after being on crutches for a year, I was getting back in shape again. And then I figured after that, we hung it up because we still skated and performed, but we didn't compete internationally because in those days, you had to retain your amateur status to compete internationally. You couldn't compete in the Olympics unless you were taking no money. And it was just, to continue to get older and not make a living was becoming unreasonable. So we turned pro and still skated and performed, but then I pursued other ways to start to make a living.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I guess it's very different than nowadays, right? Like athletes getting brand deals and
Oh,
they're able to make
nowadays
a
it'd be
living.
completely different. You could get paid. You could accept money. You could get paid for doing, for sponsors, sporting events, performances. You could teach. You could make money and still go into the international competitive events. But there, if you took any money, the minute you took $1, you couldn't all compete international. Except, all the East Germans were getting paid by the government, all the Russians were being paid, but the Americans and us and and people in our country could only compete if we were amateurs and not taking any money.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy they changed that because
Yeah.
it definitely, a lot of the high
It
level
changed the
athletes
playing
now.
field for sure. And
Yeah,
also there was
definitely.
such a communist bloc in those countries that the score for the international skating was so political, it was almost laughable. It was so inaccurate. It wasn't based on your ability. It was based on which judge came from, which country. It was so
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Times have changed a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is great. I'm curious, like just off the topic of nutrition, um, how much do you kind of give credit to your athlete days in terms of being disciplined and kind of developing that mindset to the success you have today and the books you've been able to write and the impact you've been able to have? Like, do you find that there's been a correlation and translation of skills from those athlete days to now?
Um, I don't know. You definitely with like the idea of going back to school and applying to medical school and scoring well in the MCAT and performing well in medical school, all the type of exams and heavy studying and work you had to do to accomplish that and the confidence to do that. I knew what hard work was about. I knew what it was like
Hmm.
to be going to high school and college and trying to study for exams while you're in training 6 hours a day. In addition to that, you're out
Yeah.
working out, running on the track, going to the dance studio and being in the skating rink for 4 hours a day and still have to go back and take an exam the next day. I mean, I would say high school was much more difficult than college, and high school was more difficult than medical school because try to go to high school 5 hours a day and still train 6 hours a day, after school and see how difficult that is. So certainly,
Yeah.
um, I had the ability to realize what hard work was and understand that it took hard work to assure that I would get into medical school. Once I sold my father's shoe business and cut the possibility of having that parachute underneath me, I knew I wasn't going to take a chance and not get in. I was going to apply myself and make sure I performed well at Columbia and performed well on the MCAT so I could choose what medical school I wanted to go to. So I knew what
Yeah.
hard work. I knew how to work hard and how to make sure I could accomplish what I set my goals to at. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like that's such a benefit if you were an athlete when you were younger in any type of sport. It allow you to develop that discipline and time management,
Yeah.
to just be able to kind of go for the things that you want to. And then you mentioned the confidence. I think it plays a big role. The fact you're able to, again, you compete on a very high stage. So I can imagine the level of confidence you had to have to compete at that level really translated to this new area of your life.
Yes, it's new that if you work hard and you focus and you put in the time, you're going to get you're going to get the benefit. And with any sport, it's the people who are the top are willing to put in the time, the effort, and the training. It's not just
Yeah.
talent. You have to have good training. You have to have good coaches, but you got to put in a lot of work, and you got to willing to work more than the other guys working. Same thing with getting in medical school, right? You got to, it's a lot of studying and memorization. You got to put in the time to learn all that stuff.
Let me ask you a mindset question. So I run a business where we help people improve their body composition on a whole food plant base. So fat loss, building muscle, that whole area. There's a quote that I tell the people that are listening and to the clients that we have. It's from an Olympic coach. I can't remember who it is, but it was basically the one that can endure the most boredom is the one that wins. How true would you say that is as someone that competed at such a high level as you did?
I wouldn't call it boredom. I'd say, it's sacrifice for sure. You're giving up having a social life, going to movies, going to parties, playing games and relaxing. You're just working all the time. Certainly had to sacrifice and have a very tough life, but it wasn't boring. We were working hard and we enjoyed what we did. We were very devoted and focused on our goals, but I remember like running home from school up hills with my books in a knapsack and then having to like pull sleds, and pulling things to try to get against, really just like exercise until you were really wiped out and, breathing hard and panting and having to recover and the coach forcing you to do it again while you're still tired and being able to move and still train while you're already exhausted and you're pushing yourself to your limit, having your throat burned with. So it was a lot of, I almost wouldn't want my children to go through the heavy degree of training and sacrifice because it makes you have a very abnormal social development. I didn't have the high school and college experience because I was always in heavy training all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And traveling and competing. So my social life was very limited to other ice skaters on the circuit, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you still skate?
Not really. I mean, I've gone maybe once or twice in the last 5 years just to fool around. But I mostly, snow ski. I do aggressive, double blacks and moguls and steeps and skiing still, and I love that. I play singles tennis aggressively. I hike and surf and, work in the garden and play pickleball and, do enjoy sports. But skating is kind of like, maybe if there was a place convenient, but it was such a job for me doing it so many hours a day that I much rather be on the ski slope or something, now.
Yeah. And a little bit harder to do in San Diego as well. I don't know if there's an ice rink out there.
There is, but you know what? At 70 years old, I could skate around the rink and do footwork and a few spins and, when I can't do double and triple jumps, I can't, float through the air and get that feeling of like lifting yourself 3 to 4 feet into the air. It's not safe. It's not my age per se. I haven't kept up the practice. So it takes so much timing and balance and so it wouldn't be safe for me to do the things that were difficult that I enjoyed doing when I was young. So going there to do simpler things and just skate around in circles is not going to be that, I could spin and do some small jumps and do some footwork and it's not going to be as enjoyable as what I used to be able to do when I was young. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's incredible. I'm happy that you kind of kept touch with it. A lot of people, when they go that hard in sports when they are younger, tend to get burnt out from it and don't really touch it for many, many years.
Like when I was young, I could ski down a moguls, let's say at Killington, ski down a mogul field and jump off a mogul and do a helicopter and do a 360 and do one revolution in the air and land. And now I can still steep down the moguls just as aggressively, and I probably could leap off a mogul and do a 360, but I choose not to because I figure if something went wrong and I fell at the age of 70, you probably wouldn't heal as fast, and I want to rip out my... So even though I could do some of those things, I choose not to be as aggressive in the sports as I am now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good move. Yeah, it would be impressive, but I think it's a good move.
Right.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's talk about your new book, just because we're going to be giving it away. So I want people to have a better understanding of the actual book and the work in it. What inspired you to write Eat for Life after all the books that you've written?
Well, I've written more than 12 books and 8 booklets, so I've written a lot. And I have 7 New York Times bestselling books. So I wrote...
You need another one.
I didn't need another one.
Yeah.
What happened was I wrote The End of Heart Disease. I signed a 3-book deal with Harper, and they gave me a lot of money, a huge advance, and a great deal for these 3 books. And I wrote The End of Heart Disease, The End of Diabetes, and I think the 3rd book was supposed to be called The End of Medical Care. But what happened was I wanted this to finish up my writing because I wanted to do other things, and I've been writing books for a long time, and I'm working till 12 midnight for years and years and years, working and writing books. But I gave him the 3rd book was Fast Food Genocide, which I thought was a great book and one of my best books and most enjoyable to write. And I thought it would add a great knowledge base, a new knowledge base that people had to know. So I handed them, and they said, they'll take the book, they'll pay me the same deal money, and they'll, the same percent, and they'll still get, but it doesn't allow me to complete the 3-book deal they paid me the advance for, because it's not in the series of The End of Heart Disease, The End of Diabetes, The End of Cancer, The End of Medical Care. It's a completely different book. So they wanted me to write a 4th book. So I wrote Eat for Life to be an updated version of my earlier books, Eat to Live, with the intention of it being my last book. So I could finish the 3-book deal and write a book that was modern, updated with modern science, and put together all the highlights of my previous book and take away the differences of opinion I have now compared to what I thought was the right thing to do when I wrote Eat to Live back in 2022 and 2023. The book was published in 2004. Excuse me, I meant 2002 and 2003 when I wrote the book, published in 2004, the first version of Eat to Live, and the second version in 2011. That became my a New York Times best-selling books. But it sold millions of copies. It did very, very well. So I wanted to, so now when people want to see what my work and what I stand for, I'd like them to go to a more modern book, and that's why I wrote Eat for Life, so it would have more of the updated scientific references and the changes, the little tweaks and different way of thinking I have today compared to what I thought was right when I wrote Eat to Live 20 years ago.
The book will put an emphasis on obviously longevity, hormones, cancer prevention, eliminating type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and being able to help people, achieve and sustain a weight loss.
So that's correct. I explain in the book that the same dietary portfolio and the same biochemical effect on the cells that slows aging, prevents cancer, and maximizes human lifespan is also therapeutically effective to reverse disease when applied to disease states like chronic migraines, asthma, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. And every chapter I give a few cases of multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, lupus, heart disease, diabetes, of people who reverse their medical conditions, who are not controlling it better or feeling better, but they're not sick at all anymore, don't need medications. They made complete recovery, demonstrating the incredible power of the human body to miraculously self-heal when you establish this optimal environment for healing. And the basis of this concept has to do with establishing a high nutrient concentration, a high nutrient density in each cell of the body, both in nutrient content and diversity, particularly of antioxidants and phytochemicals, while simultaneously lowering the levels of metabolic and exogenous waste in the body. So it's reducing toxicity as you increase nutrient density and shrinking the body down to a lower body mass from weight loss, keeping your body fat low. Because I'm explaining in depth why there's no such thing as a healthy overweight person. And fat cells are pathological and diseased tissue that creates inflammation and sets the stage for cancer. And so that there's no such thing. You can't be healthy and overweight. And so we're doing those three things simultaneously. And also, I'm also teaching people and making the point that as you achieve this degree of nutritional excellence in your tissues, it starts to normalize your appetite and your appestat. So you instinctually desire the right amount of calories. When you're both not receiving micronutrient adequacy, at the same time your body is toxic, it drives the body to desire to overeat food and to feel uncomfortable unless you overeat food. So I talk a lot about food addiction and how unhealthy eating leads to a higher caloric drive. So I have a lot of basic information I teach. Did you attend my lecture at the International Plant-Based Healthcare Conference last month?
I was able to do half because I was working the booth because we were one of the sponsors. So I only got the beginning part of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'd love to ask you a question. So there's three components here that you brought up. One is being able to increase the amount of nutrient density that we would be consuming, would be reducing the amount of toxicity in the body. And you brought up another point of getting to the body to a place where it naturally craves the right amount of calories, where it naturally craves you being in a healthy position. So what are ways to increase nutrient density? What are ways, just a few of them, to decrease toxicity? And how long does it take before you get the body to a place where it is craving a normal amount of calories?
Great questions. And the answer to the question is I'll answer the end part first, which it could take people 3 to 6 months, but usually closer to 6 months, not 3 months.
Okay.
Because so it takes a long time, particularly when people are overweight, burning up so much body, needing to lose so much weight.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about the concept of true hunger, instinctual hunger that happens in your upper part of your chest right here. And it takes, I published a study on, I think it was about 700 people in the study. The study was called The Changing Perception of Hunger on a High Nutrient Density Diet, that tracked people's sensation of hunger from when they used to compare to what they ate before to when they started eating this healthy nutritarian diet, how their perception and feeling of hunger changed from stomach fluttering or cramping and headaches and fatigue and agitation, weakness, which go away. And now hunger is in your bottom part of your neck and the upper part of your throat. And it's associated with increased salivation and a heightened taste sensation. But so generally,
So it should be true hunger or not true hunger?
True hunger is felt here.
Okay.
That's true hunger. Fake hunger, because what happens is people's body are so toxic that the minute they stop digesting food, they're not hungry yet. They just stop digesting. They just finished the digestive process. Their glycogen stores are filled to the brim. But as soon as they stop digesting, and the liver goes into enhanced ability to detoxify or remove toxins. When you are nutritionally insufficient and overly toxic, you don't feel well in the non-digestive state. In the heightened phase of detoxification, your body starts to feel fatigue or shaky or agitated, or headachy, or stomach fluttering or cramping. You start to go through increased detox or withdrawal symptoms, and eating again relieves that. So people mistakenly think fatigue and headache and stomach fluttering and cramping, they mistakenly think those symptoms are hunger because they're relieved by eating. And they have to overeat calories they have to eat continually to keep them from feeling those uncomfortable sensations. So now they're disconnected between the real symptoms of hunger. Once you achieve nutritional adequacy and your body is able to reduce its level of retained metabolic waste, including reactive oxygen species and advanced glycation end products, and a lot of toxins are internally produced by the own body, such as urea, ammonia, formaldehyde. We produce a lot of metabolic toxins that make us feel sickly if we don't if we don't have nutrients to deal with those toxins. So what I'm saying right now is that you have to get very healthy to desire less food. You have to eat very healthy to feel that, 400 to 500 calorie meals are satisfying, because people need 600 to 1,000 calorie meals to be satisfying. And they're not even satisfied with that because they're become habituated to the caloric rush. In other words, when you're eating foods like high glycemic carbohydrates, like honey, maple syrup, sugar, and white flour, and I'm saying white flour is a sugar equivalent because it converts into flour. The flour converts into sugar very, very rapidly and enters the bloodstream as a bolus of sugar. So there's no a biochemical difference for eating a piece of white bread and eating a piece of cake or eating sugar right from a bowl. You're eating sweets, and they flood the body with glucose. That amount of glucose flooding in the bloodstream, it rushes into the bloodstream. The medical term is a glycemic load. The glycemic load is high. And when you eat oil, like olive oil or animal fats for that matter, you can rush fat into the bloodstream. You can have a load of fat in your bloodstream. You can put 200 calories of sugar into the bloodstream, no big deal, in 5 minutes. You could put 200, 300 calories of oil in the bloodstream, no big deal, in 5 minutes. And that caloric rush acts on the brain to change the neuroplasticity, and we rewire the brain and change the opiate or dopaminergic centers of the brain to become habituated to the stimulation of excessive calories. And now you feel empty. You can eat. I can serve you a bowl of vegetable bean soup and a salad with a sesame cashew dressing and a couple of pieces of fruit for dessert. But that's not going to satisfy you because there's not enough caloric rush. You need that extra calories in the bloodstream. You got to have some French fries, a glass of soda, some ice cream, some pizza, some chocolate chip cookies, something to put a higher caloric rush in the bloodstream, because even though you ate a good, nice meal you're not going to feel like you're satisfied until you have that hit to the brain, because the brain now has become needy for the overstimulation. So what I'm saying here is that this takes time for people to change this rewiring of the brain. And this is why people fail on diets, because they don't pay attention to nutritional excellence that you need to detoxify and get rid of enough toxins for the body to be in touch now instinctually with real hunger and lose the desire for toxic hunger to overeat to deal with the withdrawal symptoms. And you asked me as part of the question, well, how do you get rid of the toxins and what foods do you eat? And the answer is, well, the same foods that fight cancer and prevent diabetes and extend human lifespan aid in the body's detoxification mechanisms and repair mechanisms and activate the ARE, the antioxidant response element in the cell that's responsible for keeping the cells clean. And the primary activator of the NRF2 transcription factors, which activate the ARE, are green vegetables. And probably the most powerful activator are green cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. I always say that
sprouts are so powerful.
If you don't like green vegetables, you better live close to a hospital, because we are a green vegetable dependent animal. And that, I consider even simple lettuce a superfood, because lettuce is no oxalic acid. The calcium is purely absorbable. And it's nature's richest source of sulfoquinidose, which is the fuel to fuel the health of the healthy bacteria in the gut. You combine that with, like you're saying, with broccoli sprouts or arugula or bok choy or watercress or cabbage. You mix the lettuce with some cruciferous greens. And by the way, you absorb 20 to 50 times as much of the nutrients if you eat it with nuts and seeds to get the fat in the same meal. See, a nutritarian diet is different from a standard diet. The standard diet gets its fat from animal fats and oils, and a nutritarian diet gets its fat from nuts and seeds and avocados, not from animal fats and oils. The fat present in the meal is important for absorption of phytochemicals and detoxification. But keep in mind, when you eat fat from a nut or a seed, like a sesame seed or a walnut, the fats are absorbed into the bloodstream so slowly that you only put 1 or 2 calories in the blood per minute. That means you only put 10 calories of fat in the blood. Your body can now preferentially burn that for energy not store it as fat. When you have a tablespoon of olive oil, you just put 200 calories of fat in the blood. And your insulin resistance, because the hallmark of long life of all healthy centenarians is being insulin sensitive and requiring only small amounts of insulin to lower blood sugar. When you're overweight, fat on the body blocks the uptake of insulin. And so the beta cells have to produce more insulin to get the sugar down. So all overweight people are hormonally challenged because they're all pre-diabetic, even if they're not diabetic yet, because they all have excess insulin.
Yeah.
But fat in the blood also blocks the uptake of insulin. So when you put oil on your food, you not only are becoming insulin resistant from the fat on your body, but now the fat in the meal is making you insulin resistant, and the body produces more fat storage hormones to try to get the fat out of the blood. But in any case, I'm saying here that when you switch from oil to nuts, you don't make yourself more insulin resistant because you don't get that many calories of fat in the bloodstream because the calories are absorbed too slowly. Just like when you switch from white bread to lentils or beans and you get the carbohydrate from a bean, it's absorbed so slowly into the bloodstream over hours that you're only putting a few calories a minute in the blood rather than putting 100 calories a minute. So the bean doesn't require a huge insulin response because even though you're putting 200 calories in, you're taking 3 hours to get those 200 calories in, not 3 minutes to get those 200 calories in. So you require a huge amount of hormonal effects to get the calories out of the blood. But all those calories in the blood, of course, then make you into a calorie-consuming monster because now you're a food addict from the caloric rush.
Would the slow absorption come because of the food contains fiber, like an oil versus like a walnut or a seed?
Yes, the sterols and stanols, you can say, are types of fiber. The fat is bound to fibers, and it takes a while for the digestive tract to break it down. And those sterols or stanols attract fat so like a magnet so strongly that they actually suck fat out of the bloodstream into the digestive tract. So fat moves from the digestive tract into the bloodstream and from the bloodstream into the digestive tract. So the sterols and stanols and nuts and seeds are sucking out, particularly the fat they suck out the most powerfully are the saturated fats and the oxidized LDL that's the largest actor causing heart attack risk. So you actually put the bad fats in the toilet bowl, in the stool for excretion, lowering oxidized LDL further. So we're saying here that, wow, when you nuts and seeds in the diet have been shown in more than 20 different studies to lower heart attack rates by about 40%, right? Tremendous amount of protection, more than any other food. And part of the reason for that is the heightened absorption of protective antioxidants from the vegetables. But the other reason is the fact that you're sucking out pro-inflammatory fats into the digestive tract, plus the fact that they're rich in other anti-inflammatory substances like ALA. The fats that are present in walnuts have an anti-inflammatory effect on the heart, and the myocytes, the cardiac cells, are more likely to go into an irregular heartbeat or an arrhythmia when you're fat deficient, is particularly ALA deficient. ALA is rich in those 5 nuts and seeds: walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, and hemp seeds. ALA is rich in those things, so we want to utilize those nuts and seeds to benefit to protect against heart disease and cardiac. And that's what some of the studies show. They showed that, particularly the Physician's Health Study, showed a 60% reduction in sudden cardiac death from abnormal arrhythmias in people eating an ounce of nuts every day. So tremendous, powerful effect of protection when you switch your fat intake from oil to nuts.
Where do you stand on the fat intake per day conversation? Because a lot of people will be preaching a very low fat content per day, and some people will be like, you don't really need to care about it. Some people need to have to put a bigger awareness. You make sure that you consume enough. Where do you stand on that range of consumption per day?
Probably in the middle. Let's go over that for a minute, okay? Because the history of the vegan movement is historically giving incorrect information about fat. We're talking about the leading nutritional gurus that are most famous, many of them advocating a low-fat diet and trying to restrict people's intake of nuts and seeds. And I don't have to mention any names, but that information has been adequately disproven. and shown that trying to, like, for example, one person said the fat you eat is the fat you wear, that when you eat oil or when you eat nuts and seeds, it puts fat on the body. And are there studies that document that? And let's look at the studies behind that statement, or the studies behind the statement that eating more fat from nuts and seeds worsens diabetes control or makes people gain weight. Let's look at the studies these nutritional advocates use are studies on oil, because it's only the studies on oil that show that oil creates more body fat. When you take an isocaloric diet, that means a diet of the same amount of calories, 2,000 calories, 2,000 calories. I take out 2,000 calories of potato and bread and put in I take out 200 calories of potato or bread out of the diet and put in 200 calories of nuts and seeds. Same amount of calories. Which causes more weight loss, would you think? And the answer is, in every study, it showed more weight loss when you took out part of the carbohydrates and substituted nuts and seeds, because all their calories are not biologically available. They get excreted in the toilet bowl.
And would it be because of a decrease in also glycogen, because you're going to be consuming less carbohydrates?
You're also taking in less glucose as well.
Yeah.
But additionally, and we're not so with oil, you're seeing more weight gain and worse diabetic control. But because the nuts and seeds don't put much calories in at one time, there's no oil rush in the blood. So when these people who are telling you about their diabetes program to restrict nuts and seeds to 1 ounce a day on their diabetes program, because too much fat inhibits diabetes, then you say, well, what are the studies to document that? And their studies are studies on oil. Because when we look at the studies with diabetes and nuts and seeds, we found that when people remove some carbohydrate, like some whole wheat bread or potato and rice or quinoa, and you substitute nuts and seeds in place to 2 ounces a day to 3 ounces a day, you see more weight loss and more diabetic control, lower hemoglobin A1Cs, and lower glucose levels. You don't see what they're saying is true, because you don't get the caloric rush of fat in the blood when you eat nuts and seeds compared to oil. And the studies on, just because the studies on walnut oil and sesame oil and almond oil show the negative effect on blood glucose, doesn't mean when you take the whole nut, you get the negative effect. So there's an exaggeration and distortion of reality. And I'm saying, and I published a study on that was published in the International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal, which gave more than 50 references showing that using more nuts and seeds made to more protection against cardiovascular death than using less nuts and seeds. And because of that, when I wrote the book at the end of heart disease, I wrote in the book that Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish recommending lower levels of nuts and seeds, I gave a lot of data and discussed it with Dr. Ornish at that point, and he changed his dietary recommendations after our discussions and working and communication on that, to then include some nuts and seeds in his diet, because I convinced him with an overwhelming amount of data from the scientific literature. But in any case, I'm saying the data is solid, and I don't think it's controversial. We don't want to overeat calories. We don't want to be snacking on nuts. We don't want to be consuming more calories than the body requires. But given that you're eating at your basal metabolic rate and you're not overweight and you're undershooting your caloric needs, then you're not having to remove fat in the diet by restricting nuts and seeds. You can eat 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 3 ounces a day, or if you're an athlete, 4 or 5 ounces a day. Now, keeping in mind, the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2 looked at this data carefully, and they looked at the amount of nuts and seeds people were eating among the Seventh-day Adventist population, which is an important study, probably the most important study, because the Seventh-day Adventists are not people smoking and drinking and eating a lot of meat. They're just eating a little bit of animal product, or they're vegans, So, and what it found was that in the highest quintile of nut and seed consumption had the longest lifespan and the lowest cardiovascular deaths by a huge amount. Compared to the lowest quintile, there was a 40% reduction in cardiovascular death in the higher quintile. Excuse me. That quintile were people eating more than 1.3 ounces, or more than 1.5 ounces a day on the average. So an ounce was not the highest quintile. An ounce was less than half an ounce was the lowest quintile. So it demonstrated that when people ate more nuts and seeds, from a half an ounce to an ounce to 1.5 ounces, they got further lifespan benefits. And the vegans that didn't eat nuts and seeds did not live as long as the vegans who ate nuts and seeds, or the flexitarians and non-vegans that ate nuts and seeds. the flexitarians who ate some animal products, who regulate nuts and seeds, lived longer as a whole than the vegans who restricted nuts and seeds. So we have a lot of data. So, of course, I'm very caloric aware, and I'm very aware of people overeating. So I'm not suggesting that a person should sit down with a bag of nuts and overeat calories from nuts. I'm suggesting know your caloric window. You have to be the perfect artist, scientist of your own body and know what the best caloric load for your body is, because you've adjusted your body fat. You see what caloric level puts you at the best version of yourself. And if you're overweight and you're not losing weight, you're taking in too much food.
Yeah.
Now, given that you're in your favorite caloric window, basically you're a 5'1" woman who doesn't exercise, or a 6'3" man who exercises 2 hours a day, your caloric needs maybe 1,100 calories a day, or could be 2,800 calories a day based on your activity and your size and your muscle mass, right? But given you're in your correct caloric window, there's no advantage to cutting back on nuts and seeds and increasing carbohydrates in place of those nut and seed calories. You're better off eating a few ounces of nuts and seeds. Even people that I'm taking care of that are 100 pounds overweight, I'm giving them about a half an ounce of nuts and seeds with each meal. That's about 1.5 ounces a day. Now, I'm not eating a half an ounce with each meal or 1.5 ounces a day. I'm eating about 1 ounce with each meal, or about 3 ounces a day for myself, because I need more calories because I'm more physically fit and do more exercise.
Yeah. Hey, amen to that. That aligns exactly with everything that I've been saying for years on this podcast. So basically, you're on the medium fat, somewhat higher carbohydrate by default in terms of proportions of carbohydrate, and like medium to lower protein when it comes to kind of building out a meal and your nutrition for the day while staying within your caloric window.
Yes, but I'd say the nutritarian diet is a little higher in protein. I've analyzed the plant-based diets coming from the gurus that try to make it low fat, and I've compared it to the nutritarian diet with more hemp seeds and edamame and almonds, and we get more iron, more copper, more phosphorus, more vitamin E, and more fat and more protein. We get much more protein in the diet from the inclusion of nuts and seeds, but also because the nutritarian diet, I score carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale, and beans and lentils are at the top of the hierarchical scale of quality because they have lower glycemic load and they're higher in protein. So the combination of green vegetables, beans and lentils, and nuts and seeds gives you more protein adequacy than just eating fruit all day long.
Yeah.
So you could do well as an athlete on a heavy fruit diet when you're young, in your 30s and 40s. But when you get to be 60 or 70, but particularly when you pass the age of 75 or 80, your ability to assimilate protein goes down. And having a diet so high in fruit could make your diet not optimally high in plant protein. Furthermore, when you think about this, what about the people putting oil on their food? Oil's 120 calories a tablespoon. If they put 200 calories of oil on their food, instead of 200 calories of almonds and sunflower seeds, they just moved 15 grams of protein out of their diet from putting the oil instead of having the fat from the sunflower seeds and the almonds. They just lost 15 grams of protein out of their diet. And the most striking findings from the scientific literature in the last decade that we found from the corroborative evidence from different researchers all over the world. So if you ask me what's the most striking finding from the scientific literature, it would say that we have so much data today on large studies from different corroborating each other, showing as animal protein goes up in a diet in a dose-dependent manner, so does lifespan go down accordingly. That we can dial up or dial down our life by dialing up the amount of animal protein we eat. We live shorter lives. Dialing down, we live longer lives. Yet, those same studies diagrammed that as you increase the plant protein in the diet, people live longer. So now we're saying more plant protein, less animal products, because they have different biological effects on the human body. Plant protein leads to protein and hormonal adequacy. Animal protein leads to hormonal excesses that drive cancer cells to replicate. And we can discuss how that works, how biochemistry, how it differs.
Yeah.
But that means that the toddler and the elderly person requires some extra protein that is met when you have a diet that's well designed without oil, but also without an excessive amount of fruit that could lower the protein adequacy of the diet, or an excessive amount of, you could say one food like rice or potato. When you start to make a macrobiotic diet or a potato-based diet with just one food, you don't get the full complementary amino acids and protein exposure compared to when you had a variety of different foods in the diet. So we want more nutritional variety, fiber variety, amino acid variety, vegetable variety, nut and seed variety, bean variety, mushroom variety. So we're saying that the diversity of your diet also enhances lifespan. And when you have more food diversity, you get more protein bioavailability for the and absorption in the elderly. So we're talking a lot of fine nuances here and tweaks that make one diet a little better than another diet. And that's what we're discussing right now,
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you. You're honestly the first doctor that I find that I align with every single point and kind of how we've been doing things with people and how we do nutrition for clients. I'm just curious as to what is that range in terms of protein that you've seen? Because you mentioned we don't want to go low. You tend to be on the medium to higher side. What does that look like in some of the work that you do with the research that you found for someone that is in her 50s, 60s, and 70s? Because that's typically who we work with.
Yeah. And like me, I'm in my 70s, but I'm still compared to I consider myself compared to like a 60-year-old because I've eaten healthy so much in my life that I'm not like a real 70-year-old. I'm like a person like a 60-year-old. Maybe by the time I'm 80, I'll be like a 70-year-old. You know what I mean? But still, I know that I can ski hard and play tennis hard and lift weights hard. I can work out hard, but I recover the next day. I got to say rest more. Because even though I can ski down the mountain with you all day long, and the next day I'm kind of wiped. I don't want to do it again. You know what I mean? When I'm younger, I could do it every day in a row. So my recovery takes a little longer. You know what I mean? So I do So I do want to have a good, replenish those proteins and have good recovery so I can get back out there and train again. But anyway, the answer to your question, we're talking about.
It's like range or ratio.
The range, yeah. So we're analyzing some of those vegan diets where people aren't paying attention to eating some nuts and seeds every day and some beans every day and some greens every day. They usually run like 10 to 13% of calories from animal protein, right? And we analyze the diets that I'm putting together and I'm following, where people are probably getting closer to 14 to 17% calories of protein, 14 to 18%. We're putting it up a level of a notch of protein up. So you're getting maybe about 40 grams of protein for every 1,000 calories, So on a 2,000 calorie diet, you're probably getting around 80 grams of protein. And I'm just estimating now, you know what I mean? But so whereas they're getting maybe 30 grams per 1,000 calories or something like that, or 25 grams per 1,000 calories, we're getting 40 grams per 1,000 calories or 45 grams per 1,000 calories. And we're pushing up the protein content from 12% to like 17% or something like that,
Yeah, and it helps with satiety as well, to have a higher amount of protein in your meals.
Yes, when you combine that, we always say better than Ozempic or not. When you combine the green vegetables, which are really high in protein, like broccoli,
Yeah.
And artichokes are really high in protein, by the way, too. So when you're combining those green vegetables with beans in the same meal and nuts and seeds in the same meal, when you have that combination of those three things, it slows gastric emptying. It makes you satisfied with fewer calories. And it feeds your energy into your bloodstream and the proteins continually to maintain you with a high level of performance. So you do get benefits from especially as we age, to get a high performance diet by paying attention to eating greens, beans, and nuts and seeds with that meal. Doesn't mean I'm not eating fruit. I'm just having a couple of pieces of fruit. I'm not making fruit the whole meal. I want to get the variety in my diet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'd love to ask you a question about a point that we talked about earlier about getting the body to a place where it is craving its natural amount of calories, right? We talked about the distribution right now. So getting back to that place, you mentioned it would take like 3 more on the 6-month end because it would take time depending on where people are starting from.
Correct.
And you mentioned that basically that 6 months is the rewiring of the brain ultimately, right? Until it kind of gets used to eating this new type of food. What do people do during that 6 months? Meaning they transition from potentially eating oil, animal products, maybe some processed food, to eating, more whole food, more variety, more of the foods that we just talked about. But we talked about the brain needing that caloric rush, right? So you talked about like true hunger and fake hunger. Right. They're probably going to have a lot of fake hunger throughout that 6 months. So is the game plan to just, suffer through it, deal with it, or is there tools and strategies to kind of help people cope while the brain kind of rewires itself?
Okay, all good questions. Let's try to break that down. The most discomfort is in the first couple of weeks, particularly the first week. So the toxic hunger and the feelings of withdrawal lessen as you go along. So a person comes in to see me or stay at my retreat in San Diego, and they may come in here and be drinking whiskey and fast food. I've had people come in, they're drinking 3 glasses of whiskey a day, And so when they start eating this diet, they feel like they want to die. They're headachy, they're sick, they're vomiting. I just had a person yesterday who's been here a week, a man, and he had abdominal muscular cramping in his abdomen. It was so painful, that they're going through withdrawal from their drug, from their food, the drug-like effective unhealthy food, right? The worse they eat, the worse they suffer from when they first change their diet, right?
Yeah.
But I warn them in advance that don't worry about if you're feeling bad the first week, because by the second week, those symptoms lessen so much, you're going to be feeling okay. It's only going to be uncomfortable the first week. It doesn't mean they're in touch with true hunger, and they may still get toxic hunger with a little fatigue between meals, but it's not going to be so painful anymore. The headaches are going to go away, and the stomach fluttering may take longer to go away, but those are light symptoms. They're not powerfully uncomfortable symptoms. So you're not that uncomfortable later in the first month or month 2 or 3, even though you didn't quite feel true hunger yet. You have to lose more body fat and have more nutrient density. We measure people's nutrient density on their skin to see their skin carotenoid score for where they're starting from at 20,000. And we know that after eating so healthfully for 3 or 4 months, their levels are still not good. 3 or 4 months of eating do not get their level of nutrients in their tissues to normalize to the levels of you or I are at. It may take them 6, 7, 8 months to get their levels close to where we are, of eating healthfully. That's why we're sometimes giving them an extra glass of vegetable juice, especially if they have a medical problem or cancer. We don't want to wait 6 months to get the level of nutrients up. We want to get the level of nutrients quicker. So we're giving them some juicing or something to get more, vegetable calories into them. But what I'm saying right now is that when they're in that white belt phase, they feel ill when they eat healthfully. That's when they need enforced abstinence and the most help. Telling them, don't take Tylenol, don't take Motrin, don't drink coffee, don't salt your food, go through the detox. You'll pass through the detox quicker. Over the years, and I mentioned earlier, one of the changes in how I treat people compared to what I did 20 years ago is that I find a higher degree of compliance and better effects at long-term success if the person jumps in to 100% rather than baby stepping their way in and doing the cheat diet. My first book was Fasting and Eating for Health, but my second book, which was such a powerful bestseller, called Eat to Live, which many people heard of. In that book, I kept people on a strict diet for the first 6 weeks, but then I allowed them to follow it 90% and still have 10% off the diet if they wanted to after the first 6 weeks that they accomplished. And the negative part of that was, over the years, I've seen so many hundreds of people where that 10% sabotaged them. It's like telling the alcoholic they can go to the bar on the weekend and drink once in a while. What happened, it kept lighting the fire under this person's addictive desires. And it kept triggering their desire to want to eat those foods and to have a bagel and to have a pizza. And they never left the desire of wanting bagels and pizzas and sweets and ice cream was perpetuated by their constantly having them. And I've found over the years that for the real food addict who has to lose a lot of weight, we have a higher chance of long-term success if I can convince them to continue to abstain from those foods. Because instead of kind of triggering their desire for them, they now, and always being stressed, deciding what they should eat and what they should not eat and being guilty when they have it, by jumping in with both feet, they start to see miraculous benefits. Their diabetes goes away in the first 2 weeks. Their headaches are gone now. They're feeling better. The weight is pouring off them at such a rapid rate. They're feeling more energized, and they're not sabotaging their results. Because, I'll give you an example. One guy comes into my facility, and he loses weight at about 1 pound a day. He's losing, on day 10, he loses 10 pounds. On day 15, he loses 15 pounds. On day 18, he loses 18 pounds. Now, he's not losing all fat. They're losing water weight, because when they're getting rid of toxins, The body doesn't need to hold on to so much water, and they're not as acidic, so your body doesn't need to swell the fat supply to be a garbage dump. So part of the fat supply is excess fluid the fat is holding on to. So he loses 18 pounds in the first 18 days. And on the 18th day, that evening, he goes down with Steve, who's my house manager, to a vegan singles dance in New York City, because this is in New Jersey. They were in New Jersey at the time. And he eats a corn muffin and some macaroni salad, all vegan, but it had some mayonnaise in it. Comes back the next morning, gains 3 pounds. 3 pounds from a little corn muffin and some macaroni salad? Well, yeah, his body put back fluid again, And he didn't get that 3 pounds off till the next 5 days. It took him 5 days or a week to get those 3 pounds off, meaning he had a week with no weight loss, 0 weight loss. Because how many of these people say to you, I'm doing the program, I'm following it, I'm doing just what you said, but I'm not losing any weight. Well, let me see what you're eating. Okay, you were following it, but you didn't do it here, you didn't do it there. 3 times during the week. That meal you had oil, that meal you had salt, that way you had white flour. You sabotaged your results. So we see people when they come to our facility and do it 100%. It's like amazing what the results are when you do it 100%. And it's amazing that when the people stay, we train them and give them the tools they need to be able to follow this when they go home. And that's why we don't fast them, do water fasts or juice fasts or too strong or intermittent fasting, because when they're a food addict and you restrict calories too much, then they food obsess. The next month, they can't get food out of their mind, and they're going to binge and re-trigger eating, and they've slowed the metabolic rate too far down. And we see a less chance of long-term successful results is measured by how much weight did you lose at the end of the year. If you had 50 or 100 pounds to lose, your success isn't determined by how much weight you lost the first month. The weight is determined by where are you after a year. If I put you on a fast and you lose 30 pounds the first month, that's irrelevant if you gained it back or have more weight a year later. So we're talking about where does that person, what do they weigh a year later? And are they keeping that off for the next 5 years? You know what I mean? And we found that we enhance the person's long-term outcome if we're scientifically designing their most favored caloric window to stay with long-term, and they give themselves time for their taste muscle to change. They learn the recipe so their food preferences change, and they stay with it long enough so their hunger signals change, and they're able to stay with it and feel good about it and be consistent with it long term.
How do you deal with reintegration in social events as people kind of transition into their day-to-day life? Because again, I eat whole food, plant-based, me and my wife do, and obviously that's what we preach all the time, but there's always the odd, hey, there's a family gathering, there's a business meeting, you're traveling I have a lot of clients that travel to different countries and trying to navigate eating this way. So how do you guys deal with that or teach that?
Well, we've studied that the hallmark or commonality of people who've lost 50 to 100 pounds and kept it off for 5 years or more under our program were those people who walk the walk and talk the talk, which means they like the opportunity to be in public and to demonstrate their dietary preferences because it gives them these superpowers to have goodwill for other people, to be demonstrative of what they've achieved. If they go and eat off their diet, then they're not having an opportunity to have creative goodwill for others. They love the fact that they're now a role model and what they've achieved. Yeah. And they've also liked the foods they're eating, and they bring their own food. They show their own salad dressings. They show how great healthy desserts can taste. They're proud of their nutritarian food and how great it can taste and how their taste buds acclimated to it. But what I'm saying right now is that we did a lot of research on this, discovering why people who were so rah-rah excited about eating this way, why they went back to their own home environments and failed and went back to eating conventionally and gained the weight back. The commonality of those people is that they felt pressured by the cultural and social environment around them, that they weren't fitting in. Yeah. And it caused them too much stress. So they went back to eating normally. So we train people. I talk about that if you don't have robust emotional health, you can't be comfortable being a health nut and being different. So we train their emotional health. Because when you're raised in America, you think your self-esteem is based on how people like you and how they praise you. And that's called externally generated self-esteem. That's like junk food. It's a bottomless pit that once you start getting it and feeling power from that, you just want more and more and more. You're never satisfied. Yeah. It's like you're a movie star, you're a rock star. You're not happy with all the praise. You're miserable. It doesn't lead to you an ultimate good feeling in your life as you get older. Internally generated self-esteem comes from your own behavior, not from other people's behavior. It doesn't matter what people think of you. It's what you think of them. It's how you see the outside world and how much you appreciate and are grateful for the world outside of you that isn't you. And every opportunity to interact with another individual gives you the chance to show them your creative goodwill for them and to show them love or care or interest in their life. And so a person says to me, "No, if I had eat like you eat, I'd rather be dead, because who would want to have no enjoyment from eating? And where do you get your protein?"
That a few times.
Yeah. So now is my response going to try to give them a comeback or push my own ego up so I can feel better about myself that he insulted me or something? I don't care about the insult. I don't care about the ego. I only have one purpose, and that's to see how I can be in some way potentially useful to this individual, to show them I care about them in some way. And maybe talking about diet or nutrition isn't the best thing right now. Maybe it's just showing them that I care about them and want the best for them. Maybe it's just showing them I have some interest in their life. And so the point I'm making right now is that we build internal self-esteem from the way we act and how we see, not from how people like us. We have to rechange the cultural phenomenon, get rid of our egos and trying to impress other people, and realize that when we demonstrate how we live so healthfully, it increases our potential to have goodwill for others, as well as take care of our own life. We can show people more love, and we can show people the potential to maybe not tonight, maybe 3 months from now or 3 years from now, you'll be affected by knowing me and how I acted back then. But I would have taken away any opportunity to have a positive effect on you if I wasn't being consistent myself in my own behavior, and consistent in how I eat, how I exercise regularly, and how I'm continually kind and thoughtful to other people. Then I can earn their respect over time. So the answer to your question is that we do try to train people with the skills they need when they go home, and I try to train people a new way to a mental outlook on life, and an outlook that hopefully will make them happier and more content and more at peace.
It's that leading by example. And I think a lot of people, when they transition to eating plant-based, don't accept that they kind of become a walking billboard for the choices that they've made. And I feel like once that kicks in, to your point, it makes it easier for people to be compliant and to lead by example and to continue to live this lifestyle. But I don't think everyone understands that, because it is so different than what society deems normal. By default, you become a walking billboard for it.
100%. That's, I remember this last year I was invited to speak at a doctor-run kind of lifestyle medicine seminar, right? And I was the keynote speaker. And they invited me to fly in from out of town, and they took me out to dinner. And so who took me out to dinner? All the other doctors who invited me to speak at the lifestyle seminar. And they went to a restaurant, and they're eating pasta with olive oil and drinking wine,
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to like a lifestyle medicine. I thought you guys were all lifestyle medicine doctors. I'm the only one on the table who's not drinking wine, not eating oil and grease or white flour, who ordered a salad and some broccoli on the side. And but I felt that number one, I wouldn't eat that stuff anyway. But number two, it made my message have more impact. The fact that I'm living the life, I'm not just teaching it, I'm living it too,
Just because you brought that up about the restaurant and wine and pasta, I've noticed from just having had some decent success in my life in the past several years, and you're put in different types of circles of people that are more successful, and their statuses. There is a status to eating a certain way. There's a status to ordering wine, going to the nice restaurant that will have all of these foods, right?
Right.
How do you navigate that with people and for yourself? Because I have a lot of like really high achieving clients that are in that high tax bracket, that are like, it is very hard to step away from that, because if you're in that world, that's all it is around you. There's a status to eating in certain places and eating a certain way.
Yes, and having those friendships and the camaraderie, and you're not going to look right with your friends if you don't do it with them, and all that stuff, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I said to these people, Have any relatives or people close to you that have been stabbed by a knife or shot by a bullet in their torso or head? And they say, of course not. What are you talking about? And I say, well, how about heart attacks or cancers, strokes, any of those? They go, yeah, of course. Everybody raises their hand. And I say, do you think that you're going to be the one exception, that you live in this dangerous neighborhood? You're living in it, and don't you want to get out of those danger? What would you want to continue to live in that neighborhood knowing the expectation that what's going to happen to you is the same thing that's happening to your elderly relatives? Is that what you want your later life to be? Or why wouldn't you take advantage of these modern science of nutritional excellence that we've known, the ability that we can add 20 solid years to our life with good, healthy mental and physical capacity to fully enjoy our life without the medical tragedies that befall other Americans? You're not going to escape from the biological laws of cause and effect. If you live like other Americans, you get what other Americans get. So I'm going to ask you the question. Do you think that living that way, the way you're living, to use food as a recreation, is worth it to undergo that kind of tragic later life, to suffer all those years before you die and to lose your mental faculties and to be physically unwell and to have and deal with cancer and that stuff? And do you think your food tastes that much better do you think you enjoy your diet so much more than I enjoy my food? Because I'll tell you right now that my banana ice cream with the macadamia nuts and the real vanilla bean powder tastes better than the junk food, bleach tasting, chemicals, sugary thing that you're eating right there. I enjoy mine more, not less. So number one, you're not enjoying your food more. I'm enjoying my food just as much as you're enjoying yours. Sure, I got used to my food, my taste buds and my taste muscle improved, and I learned a lot of great recipes. But you're not getting more pleasure out of eating. You just think you are. Is it worth it to take 10 or 15 years off your life and to live and by the way, the 10 or 15 years of life could be 20 or 30 years, because a person could suddenly have a heart attack at any minute, and you don't get any guarantees, right? You could be dead at age 65 and be dead.
Yeah.
But the amount of fear and suffering in conventional medicine is just going to doctors and getting tested and measured, and fear of diagnosing and looking for cancers. It's just like a whole mindset of insanity, of living a life of fear. And I speak to doctors this way, and I say, and they'll agree with me. I say, do you want to live like that? Isn't this a much more peaceful way to live, to be living without fear of being sick and letting your actual lifespan come to its ultimate conclusion rather than killing yourself with food? Is it really worth eating bagels and croissants and donuts and pizza and burgers? Is that worth it?
Yeah.
If it's worth it to you, that's up to you. I mean, it's your choice, certainly. I know when I give lectures, people are listening to, I know the way the brain works. Their primitive brain doesn't want to give up their addictive pleasures. They're thinking to themselves, that they're hearing me talk, that sounds reasonable and scientific and even interesting, but it's not for me. I could never do it because I got this, my family won't eat this way, my job, I travel too much, I'm too old, I can't do, they got all these reasons. The primitive brain wants to hold on to their addictions. But once we address this person's fears and rationalizations and addictive primitive brains, or once we start to address all this with enough education, most people want to make the change. Yeah. And most intelligent, logical people can make the change. You can sit down with people, even people who've come to the wrong way of thinking, if they're going to give you enough time and enough attention to really rethink their false beliefs, they can reevaluate them. But if they don't give you the time and attention and effort to really take time to address every little point, it's very hard for them. So that's why doctors can't do it in a medical visit. A person can't come into a doctor and doctor spends a half an hour with a person. They're not going to radically change their life. The person requires more motivation, education, and input. That's what I've come to over the years. And that's why we have a program where people come and stay here for a few months to get on the program. I'm sure that's why you're coaching people and you're keeping people that you're working with them for months and giving them and keep educating and teaching and motivating them to make the right choices. You can't just do it in one 15-minute session.
No, and that's why we have the podcast, to be honest. Like this is, if they are committing, that much time to listen to something, they're more invested in the information that's being shared. Yeah. And that allows us to have like a greater impact through these episodes. I think it's a really good reframing, and you're right. We've coached about like 60 physicians throughout the years who on their own transformation. And we talk to a lot of doctors that choose not to take on this lifestyle. And you're right. When I've been going to a lot of conferences, I went to PCRM and HA. We sponsored pretty much all the big events this year. And a lot of physicians I talk to, they're like, yeah, this is great information. I'll pass that off to my patients. I'm like, but what about you? Right? Like you're the middle. You should also implement it.
Yeah. How are they going to pass it on to their patients if they're not doing it themselves? What a bunch of bullcrap, right?
That's how I feel about it.
It's like the smoking doctor telling his people to quit smoking, telling his patient to quit smoking, right? The overweight doctor telling the person to lose weight. It's like it's not going to work unless you are, and they really haven't embraced it or aren't passionate about it. Because if you're not passionate about the outcome and what could happen for people, you are never going to motivate other people to live this way. So that they're just giving you, it's just obviously.
I have one last question for you. Do you have enough time in your schedule? Yeah,
sure.
Awesome. So you brought up binge eating earlier. So obviously I think that's a big thing in the weight loss space. A lot of society is trying to lose weight. We're having obesity epidemic. A lot of people are struggling with food and junk food, and binge eating has been recurring more and more as people are trying a lot of fad diets or starving themselves, and then are just bouncing back in the opposite direction. And it's causing causing a bad relationship with food, which is kind of how people are framing the binge eating.
Agreed.
And so you talked about jumping with both feet in. How does that work in terms of helping to improve the relationship with food? Because I feel it's a key term that people are searching for.
Absolutely. It's so important there. Because when you lose weight, it's no benefit to losing weight if you gain it back again. And the regaining of weight is a health risk. That's when you put on more inflammation, more visceral fat, when you regain weight.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So a person has to make changes they're going to stick with. And so the education that they get is very important. And to learning how to live this way and actually doing it where you're doing it without excessively calorically restricting them. I'm always saying that a person should be, when they're doing a proper nutritarian diet and hitting their basal metabolic requirements pretty closely, believe it or not, they're losing at about a kilogram a week, about 2.2 pounds a week. That's a kilogram. And if a person is overweight and losing at a pound a week, or less even, they're not going to see their estrogen production go down, their insulin production go down, their CRP be fixed, their platelets clotability, their mild peroxidase, their oxidized LDL. You see the parameters of risk diminish when a person is losing weight. So you're protecting yourself from a heart attack, and you're seeing the benefits if you're sticking with the diet long term and continue the process and moving towards your ideal weight. The minute you binge and go back the other way, even if you're 40 pounds lighter, even if you lost 50 pounds already and you gain back 10, when you gain back 10 pounds, you're at least as high a risk or higher risk than you were when you were 50 pounds higher if you went and pigged out at the buffets at Las Vegas or went on a cruise ship and gained weight. So you have to continue losing and not regain the weight. So that we're not teaching people how to diet. We're teaching people how to have a better relationship with food and learning that these foods have miraculous lifespan enhancing anti-cancer benefits, anti-heart attack and stroke benefits. And we're also, giving them all the reasons why they shouldn't be salting their food either. We're teaching them about how to live longer, how to have a better life, to enjoy their later years, and how to live consistently and make it taste good with the expectation that their taste buds are going to continue to improve, they'll continue to learn the recipes, and they're going to enjoy this way of eating. And they do enjoy the way of eating right at the beginning because we have really excellent recipes and they're not feeling they're losing anything. They're eating robust quantities of food. We're not starving them. They're not walking around hungry. They're satisfied with less food. They're still losing 2 to 3 pounds a week, but we didn't cut their calories so far down that they're going to obsess about food or excessively slow the metabolic rate. That doesn't mean that some people are still not going to fail.
Yeah.
We're just trying to do the best we can to enhance the probability that people succeed. It's still up to the individual to make the choices for themselves too. And we can do we want to give them a lot of indoctrination and teaching and education And sometimes people, come back and hear it again. Sometimes people hear the lecture. So that's why I encourage people to come to me and to stay at our retreat, to stay for 3 months. I want them to hear the teachings another next month over again. I want them to, because when you go to a drug rehab center, you stay there for 3 months, because the longer you stay with the program with enforced abstinence, the less chance of recidivism. The same thing we see here. The people that stay 6 weeks do better than the people that stay 3 weeks. The people that stay 3 months do better than the people that stay 1 month on the. So whether you're doing it by coming to a retreat like I have, or doing it on the internet through a coaching program, or doing it by following yourself with videos and books, you still have to be consistent, and the expectation has to be that you can't keep jumping on and off this. You have to be willing to do this long term to see the benefits and to really feel comfortable doing it. It's like you got to keep repeating the right type of eating over and over again, and it becomes second nature, and then you like living and eating this way.
And I think it's a good time frame for people to have that little 6 months to kind of help rewire things as they jump in with both feet. And just, I think it helps management of expectation. I think it plays a key role in success in a lot of these journeys. If they think it's going to happen in 2 weeks and it doesn't, they're like, doesn't work, I'm going to stop doing it.
Right. You know what works? We try to get them to identify that they have a new identity as a nutritarian, and they're proud of that new nutritarian identity. They've changed their identity from a person who's eating to, committing suicide with food, to a person that's really taking good care of their health. And they see that there's no reason to eat foods that were destructive to their own survival, longevity, and happiness. There's no reason they should eat self-destructive, addictive foods. They should love themselves and pick and be the best version of themselves possible, and pick the best quality foods to live their best quality life. So it's a whole new, different mindset, that can help people.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you. That's why we coined the term fit vegan with our clients. And I even got it tattooed inside my arm here for all my photos that I take with people. But it's that new identity, right? It's like if you were to ask someone to do cocaine and they don't do drugs, they're absolutely going to tell you no. Well, you want that, hey, can you eat a Twinkie? It has to be the same level of no, because you don't identify as a person that does that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Awesome.
That's cool. Well, we're so alike.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a lot in common. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, how you do nutrition is exactly how we do nutrition. So yeah, it's phenomenal, because a lot of doctors will go, again, I respect everyone's work. I don't want to talk badly about anyone, but they'll go down the fasting route. They'll go down the low fat route. They'll go down. You don't need to be aware. You don't need to put any emphasis on your calories. I'm like, hey, I can eat 5,000 calories of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and I'm going to put on a bunch of fat, right? I don't burn that much per day. And so, yeah, I've grabbed what is needed to help people improve their body composition, but stay healthy. And everything you said is exactly what we do. So yeah, it makes me happy to hear that.
Yeah, and people have to, want to work on their body.
Yeah,
they should have. Look at all the nutritional advocates that are out of shape and don't look fit, and
ton of them.
All right. How many of them have six packs? Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very small percentage of the population that has a six pack. I can't remember what the stats were, but it was like a very 1 or 2% of the population has a six pack.
Oh, wow. Well, just so everybody's unhealthy, it's only 2.4% of Americans that are even in a favorable BMI.
Yeah.
Because what I'm saying is, sure, 11, 12% have a BMI below 23, but a lot of those in that 11, 12%, the majority of them are people who smoke cigarettes or have medical conditions, or occult cancers, or digestive disorders, or depression, or alcoholics, or smokers, keeping them thin. It's only 2.4% of the normal weight people, or 2.4% of the total
amount,
that are a normal weight because they eat healthfully and exercise regularly. So it's a very small percent of Americans. The rest of them are all over. The other 89% are all overweight, right?
Yeah.
11, 12% have a favorable BMI. Most of those are sick, but the ones that are not sick are a small percent. So, everybody who eats American food is in bad shape.
Yeah, I saw, again, I don't know if I'll get the stats right, but it was around 70% of people that would qualify to go into the Army if we were to go to war wouldn't meet the fitness criteria and the metrics to be able to actually go into the Army, which is completely wild to me. It means I'm Canadian, so I'm getting out of here if something happens. But yeah, United States would be a different situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Joel, do you mind kind of sharing a little bit more about your retreat? And then for the people listening, we'll talk about, how to access the giveaway.
Sure. Well, my website is drfurman.com, and we have Dr. Furman. We have a tab that says retreat. You can hit the retreat to get more information about people. Because as you know, a lot of people feel they just can't do this alone. They need help. And then to go, some people say, I just got to go somewhere and just be in that environment and do it. And it does. It helps a lot of people. And I like, and my wife and I, we love work. We love getting to know people and working with people. It's so much personally rewarding. So we like doing that. And then I have, my 40 years of doing this, I've developed, products and services at drfurman.com where people, can watch the, 20 video masterclass. They can ask me questions and they ask the doctor for them. And if they join the membership, they can get, food that are, salad dressings and supplements that are designed for their particular diet. So I have a lot of things that I have to make things easier, like tomato sauce with no salt or sugar in it, like a ketchup with no salt or sugar in it, like a salad dressing made with nuts and, so in other words, I have extra products and services to reach out to the audience I speak to. So, and also lots of information. So lots of education. And like you, I have a podcast called the Eat to Live Podcast, which is I do with my daughter Jenna, which is a lot of fun, and people could listen to that too. So thank you for the opportunity to share and to share with your audience. And obviously I have a gift for the audience, the Beginner's Guide to a Nutritarian Diet, that they could download and have access to. And it's terrific that you're giving away some free books of Eat for Life. If people want to say, where did they start? If they want to learn more about my work and Nutritarian diet, I'd say, well, the best thing to do would be to read my latest book, Eat for Life. You get the most, because you get all the references and all the science and there's more than 2,000 scientific references. And I'm not just saying something without putting a lot of effort of my life of reading studying 40,000 studies and pulling out the best corroborative and important studies to be able to make choices in your life.
Beautiful. Yeah. So for the people listening, I will put all the links down below in the description to the website, but also to your YouTube channel, because I got to listen to a few of the episodes in preparation for this show. You guys have a great show, very nice setup, very professional. Honestly, definitely recommend people check it out. As for the free ebook, I will put it as the top link in the description for the people listening. And for the book giveaway, here's how we're going to do it. You guys are going to head over to Instagram. And on Instagram, I'll be making a post. We'll make a nice little collage. I actually have a photo with you from the Plant Nutrition Project. So we'll post that photo and we'll use that as the book giveaway. And I'll have all the instructions down below. But basically, just want to go on there, like the post, and then tag a friend that you would also like to receive a copy with. And then we'll open it for 7 days. So if you're listening to this episode from the day it goes live, it'll be open for 7 days. And we'll pick the winners and then we'll ship the books out to your house so you can have this information and ultimately start implementing it before we get to January. So you don't have to wait to New Year's to have those superpowers. You can have them and start taking action before. All right. So Dr. Furman, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show. I appreciate it. I'm really happy we got to connect at the conference and in this recording. And everyone, thank you very much for listening. And we will see you all in the next episode.